What is going on, you guys? Is Brandon here with James for another Blues Note show, and tonight we are going to cover some few things that are up and coming for the Blues and some things that are happening going on right now. With the things that are going on right now, we have the youth movement within the St. Louis organization that we've seen throughout this past season, and then kind of moving into the offseason and to future seasons, as well as the IIHF World Championship that is potentially ending this weekend because they have the championship today, I think, between Switzerland and Finland. Also, we have massive off-season decisions between the core or kids that we're going to kind of briefly touch on. With the moves that are coming up for St. Louis and the draft, those are some key things that probably be good for us to kind of touch on today as we get closer to the draft, which is going to be the last thing that we kind of touch on today. As with all the draft capital and everything that the St. Louis Blues have, do they stay where they are or do they trade up? Those are going to be all the things and more that we're going to talk about today. So, James, starting with the IIHF stuff, obviously we had 4 or 5 Blues that were kind of in the mix with that. We had Robert Thomas, Dylan Holloway, Pius Suter, Oskar Sundqvist, and then a prospect goalie in Love Harenstam. Obviously, Love Harenstam didn't really see any kind of action in the World Championship. He was there as more like a third goaltender for Sweden, but we did see a lot more action from the other Blues regular players. What were your thoughts on how these guys did? Because obviously they made their names known a little bit during the championship.
Yeah, Brandon, what really impressed me was hearing about Dylan Holloway contributing like he did. I think he ended up having like 4 goals, I think, and some assists.
Yeah, 4
Uh,
goals, 1 assist.
yeah, for Canada. And
Mm-hmm.
then Robert Thomas played exceptional. So it was great to see those guys getting out there and still getting that gel together. Keep themselves fresh. So that way, when they start the full off season, then they're going to be in better shape there. Pius Suter, super glad to see he's in the finals. He's been a good contributor for is he Finland or Sweden? I'm sorry, Finland, right?
Pius Suter is for Switzerland.
Switzerland. Dang it. I knew it was. Yep, I got
It
this.
happens.
Too many of these countries. But he's been a great contributor. And the only thing that sucked in the whole situation was when Oskar Sundqvist went out with a knee-to-knee injury by Timo Meyer.
Mm-hmm.
So he got suspended for the rest of the tournament. And that's going to be a questionable thing. I don't recall if Sundqvist is a free agent this year or he's got another year left. But if that needs any contact, if it's as bad as I thought it was, we may not see Sundqvist for a while, if at all, next season.
No, he was a
So
UFA after this season.
okay, so he's still under contract by the Blues. So my heart's out to the guy. He's a great player, super good contributor, but it's just another nasty injury that body takes, and it's hard to say if he's going to come back from that.
Yeah, that'll be a tough one, especially with his contract being up this summer and all the injuries, and especially with his age. I would think that it's going to be a hard thing for the Blues to really take a look at him and want to really exercise a contract extension with him, because we've seen him over the last couple of years have a lot of lower body injuries, and even then, it kind of like what we're going to be touching on for a little while today. We got a lot of young talent that are kind of coming through the Blues organization, and that spot that Oskar Sundqvist has been kind of filling could be something that we see one of the younger guys filling this upcoming season.
Yeah. It's, maybe it's time to, as much as you hate to say it, he was a great contributor, amazing contributor for the team, during the cup run. And he's just been a great leader for them. I remember, I believe they had talked to Alexander Steen about what Sundqvist brings to the team. And, they have a lot of, the Blues have a lot of players that are from Sweden and from Finland, like in those type of countries, and they all idolize him because he's a great contributor, great teammate, and he's always wanting to help coach those guys. Training. It's the perfect teammate that you want is a guy that he's a super good contributor when he's younger, but as he's gotten older, not only does he still contribute, not as much as he did in the past, but he contributes now by coaching the next generation, the next set of younger players, and especially people from his own country, that he gets that information that he can give them that type of information that makes them better players for the Blues.
Yeah, I mean we've seen that countless years with Oskar. He's been a big contributor on the penalty kill, and I mean, as much as you see guys like Robert Thomas, Jordan Binnington, and a lot more of the more veteran type players talking with guys during practice in the locker room, and whenever the cases may be at practice, talking with a lot of these young guys and everything. I mean, Oskar Sundqvist was more or less one of those guys that was always there trying to help improve a lot of these guys. And I mean, if the Blues end up not extending him, that's a big veteran presence that you're going to be more or less losing in the lineup.
Right. And you hate to lose those guys in the lineup, but it's also one of those things. Do you keep a guy like that? Or do you kind of look at the realistic point that's like, is he really able to contribute and give you what you need? Now, if they're just looking for a guy who's going to give you about 40 games, if they're good with him being that, then I think that might be worth the risk to go and sign him. But
Yeah.
if they're looking for center help that is going to give them 60 plus games, I just don't think Oskar Sundqvist has that anymore. I just
No.
really don't.
And especially when you got guys like Zach Dean,
Hmm.
uh, Kaskamaki, Adam Gecko, that
I
are
mean,
all kind of in that center position, and Otto Stenberg, who are all in that kind of that center
right.
uh, position that are coming through the midst
Hmm.
of everything.
And
You're
also, go ahead, finish. Sorry.
you're gonna have to kind of start filing those guys into the lineup at some
Hmm.
point or another. And I mean, when you have older guys kind of coming through and their contracts are kind of coming up, there's going to be give or take if you're going to be able to get those younger guys into the lineup with filling in a veteran in there in those
Right.
spots.
And one guy you were mentioning some of the players from the Springfield Thunderbirds who had a fantastic postseason. Don't forget about Dylan Dubé, who, yes, he's
Yeah.
not signed by the Blues, but if you take Oskar Sundqvist out of the picture, who's to say you can't swoop in and sign Dubé to a two-way contract, and then you get a really good contributing center for your team that could slot into that third spot, maybe even second spot, depending on how good he is.
Yeah, for sure. I'm to be frankly honest, I completely forgot about him.
Well, but you're also talking about all of our young guys, and Dubé's not young in that sense. He's 27 or 28, but what he's done this past year for the Thunderbirds, he's got the attention of the NHL. So it's
Yeah.
it's in the Blues' court if they want to make that move.
Yep, for sure. And kind of also on the topic of a lot of our young prospects or even rookies that have kind of seen time up with the Blues, we've seen a lot of the rookies get 43 goals this season. That's for the Blues, and that's the most rookie goals for any team in the NHL. And that's some of what local coverage has been using as a main argue point for the future, legit, bright future for this team. Snuggerud had led the rookies with 21 goals this season.
Mm-hmm.
Been driving a big chunk of the production, and I feel like that's something that a guy like Snuggerud, who came into the scene not this year but last year for a brief stint of time, but I mean everybody had a big everybody had a high expectation for him, and he really exuded that in the few games that he had last season. But he kind of started out a little slow this season, but towards the end, like halfway through, and even after the Olympic break, you really saw him
Mhm.
really break out in a way.
You're right. He did. Like you said, the start of the season, he wasn't super contributor. He was doing it, but he's getting used to the NHL grind. Then he took that injury. So he was out for several weeks there. But then after that Olympic break was the biggest point where, they decided to put him with Holloway and Thomas together.
Yep,
And that line was lights out. And there's a lot of great offensive contribution. And, he's a really smart player. He's not just a goal scorer. Like he gets in the offensive zone where he needs to and sets up plays. I mean, that's it. He's a good all-around player. And that gives me a lot of encouragement to see a guy show up with that much skill to give a top line an actual viable threat for a goal scorer, which we, and this isn't knocking Jordan Kyrou, but Jordan Kyrou is a different type of goal scorer compared to Jimmy Snuggard. Snuggard's got a wicked shot. He's a sniper type goal scorer. One of those guys. You put him in a in a face-off circle, he's going to score that goal on the power play or anything. Uh, whereas Kyrou is a fast speed type of winger who generates goals on the rush, on the
yep,
fly, and that's it. And he's a great player, but to have that legitimate goal scorer, a threat to where if that guy gets the puck, it's got a good chance to go in. We haven't seen that in a long time. It's
for
been
sure.
I do believe Scott Young was the last like true sniper we had who had 40 goals in a year. So, with if if they decide to keep Thomas or whatever happens, if they keep those three guys together and they legitimately stay healthy all year, they contribute all year, who's to say that you wouldn't see Snugger chip in 40 goals and give Robert Thomas that 90, 100-point plateau that, we all expect him to do. He just hasn't hit it yet.
Yeah, and I mean if Snuggerud, well, if that whole top line, I feel like can stay healthy for a
Hmm.
whole season, and touching on that, meaning Jimmy Snuggerud, Robert Thomas, Dylan Holloway, I feel like all three, if not two of them, I obviously yes, I feel like if he's able to have a full season of play, I feel like Robert Thomas could easily be 100-point player, and then if Jimmy Snuggerud and Dylan Holloway are able to stay healthy, I feel like they could potentially have close to 80, 90-point seasons.
Right. They, after the Olympic break, they were one of the top lines in the NHL.
Yeah.
And again, but it's great that they can do this for a 2-month stretch, but they got to do it for an 8-month stretch. They've got to do it from September to April. This needs to be their goal. Not saying they all have to be 100-point players, but we need this top line to be a top line. Like we
Exactly.
can't keep doing this. We're not going to do anything the first half. Second half, we're ready. Like, Doug Armstrong has said time and time again, the second half of the season means nothing to me. And he's right. Because yeah, you could be great in the second half, but if you're not decent in the first half, you got nothing. And
Yeah.
this is where we stand. This is why they didn't make the playoffs because they were terrible the first half of the season, and then they, decide to flip a switch and like, oh, I guess we should start playing. Like enough,
Yeah. Whenever
the
they're in close to second to last spot in the standings, and then they're like, oh, we could get a high draft pick, and then all of a
right,
sudden they start winning again,
yeah,
and they get positioned at the pretty much 11th worst, to the point to where they're then hitting at the 11th spot in the NHL draft, rather than with they would have stayed where they're at before the Olympic break. They could have easily had probably a 2, 3, or 4 spot in the NHL
yeah.
draft.
It's very possible, but the draft's rigged, so it's irrelevant. So,
Yeah,
because don't forget, Calgary finished. Look at Calgary and Vancouver. Those poor teams were two of the worst teams in the league, and Vancouver gets the third pick, and Calgary gets the sixth pick, which is crap. So, again, the draft is one thing, but it just goes to show you like This Blues team was never a, one of the worst teams in the NHL. They have a good team,
Oh
but
yeah,
it's the
it's
work
just getting
ethic
that
that's, yeah, the
consistent play
consistency,
together.
right? The consistency and the work ethic. Like, you look at the teams in the Stanley Cup final right now. You got Vegas, you got Carolina. These teams, yeah, Vegas didn't play great at some points, but they were consistent all year and they dug in at the tail end. They made the coaching change, which ended up being the savior of saviors for them,
Yeah,
and John
and picking up
Tortorella.
Rasmus Anderson from
Yeah,
who was
again,
that
yeah,
team from?
which
Montreal.
is what they do, which is what they're good at doing, is finding that, you know, that amazing way to just weave in and out of the salary cap and get it just right. And they did. But
Yep.
the true testament to me, in my opinion, as a team that the Blues should strive to be, is Carolina. This isn't a team that goes after the number one free agent every year. They pick up guys that work with Rod Brind'Amour's coaching style. So they don't, again, they don't need. That's a team that doesn't need a McDavid or you know any of the top, or Austin Matthews. They need guys that play a suffocating, tight checking game. And watching Carolina play game in, game out, this is what they've done all year. And that's the type of team that the Blues, the way they're structuring their team, they're really making it that way, but they have to play that way. It's it, if you're designing a team that way where you don't have an elite star player, then you better play a very consistent game of hockey. And the Blues don't do that.
Hmm.
That's one of their drawbacks. But I'm hoping, like we talked about, these younger guys that brought that hunger in there, that drive. I'm hoping that's the next step in this team, the next evolution.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I mean, we've seen a lot of the younger-ish players, like obviously Snuggerud,
Hmm.
Neighbours, Holloway, Stenberg, and Lindstein. We've all seen all these guys kind of coming up. Neighbours has been around for a little bit longer than some of the other guys, same as Holloway.
Hmm.
Uh, what are some of the things that you liked or thought that surprised you from some of these players throughout this past season?
Well, I really like, again, I really thought that after Holloway came back from his injuries and Snuggery came back from his injuries, like, I can tell you right now, Holloway is a bona fide, high end player. And really, Edmonton has to be just kicking themselves and drinking heavily, realizing that this is a guy that we could have had that could have brought us to another Stanley Cup final or beyond,
Yeah,
had they
because they
given him that
were
opportunity.
estimating that he wasn't going to be any more than a third liner, right?
Yeah, he's projected as a third line player, and he has the ability to be a 90-point player when given the opportunity. He's so fast and he's aggressive on the puck. He's hard to get the puck away from, and
Mm-hmm.
he's just the
He
way
just
he
doesn't have
drives.
any. He don't
Yeah,
stop.
the way he drives in there. He's it's funny. As I watched these three guys, it really reminds me of the Boston Bruins perfection line, where you had Brad Marchand, you had oh my gosh, now I'm blanking out again. Either way, the team that the Blues played against in the Stanley Cup final, that first line, those guys, the perfection line, played, not that they were the greatest players, but they played so well. And each of them had a definitive role on that line, and they excelled at it. Patrice Bergeron, he was your shutdown high end center, very reminiscent of how Thomas plays.
Yeah.
He's not the elite center like Robert Thomas, but he is a hard worker. And that's something that Thomas could strive to be. That Patrice Bergeron, you've got the Brad Marchand type, um, in Dylan Holloway, the guy who gets in the corners, goes after the guys. He's not licking people's faces. He's not going to start fights. He's not an instigator in that sense, but he plays a game that people get ticked off at because he's nonstop. And then, yeah, Jimmy Snuggert is not going to be, Pasternak, but
He
Snuggert
has
is going
that
to be
level of degree of play to him, and the shot.
right, right, right. I mean, that's a good, having those guys impress me. Jake Neighbors, he really kind of had an off year. A lot of it. I don't think he really had injuries necessarily. I know that a lot of things I read, they said he really took the the Braden Shen trade hard because that was the guy
That
he
was
really
his
looked up
dude,
to. Yeah, he's a great guy. But he took that hard. So like, I'm hoping that he can just get that out of his system. He's a good leader for this team. He's a future. They made him he made him an alternate captain after Shen was traded. So it leads me to think they still think this guy's a leader, and I think he can contribute. It's just a matter of he's got to get back to his playing style, that aggressive, staying in front of the net, getting those loose pucks, making stuff happen.
yep.
That's why the guy went back to back years with 20 goals. Is that
Oh, of course.
he was in the trenches. We need more trench guys like him. So
Yeah,
that's
because
an
out
important
of all
step.
the Blues players, I felt like he was one of the few that actually liked to stick his neck out and actually get in front of the goal
Right.
and try to
Right.
get
Right.
deflections in the net.
Right. And we haven't had a guy like that since David Backus. Backus like practiced it every single practice. So that way he'd be in front of the net. He'd deflect shots. He would get in the middle of it and cause traffic, which is what we need. I just wish Neighbours was a little bigger, like David Backus. He's not small, but he's not that overpowering physical presence like David Backus was.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I feel like he could get to that level of play, but I feel like it's going to take him a few more seasons to get to that level of play,
Hmm.
like what we saw from Backus or uh, even like Bergeron that we were talking about earlier. But I feel
Right.
like he could get to that as long as he still continues to put the effort in. Yeah, we saw Braden Shen leave the team and everything, and he might have gotten down from it, but in the end of the day, he still is going to be having to put in the effort to show that he's wanting to be one of those members of that core group.
Exactly.
Kind of last question before we kind of move on to some of the big offseason decisions that this team is going to have to kind of go forth is which young player are you most confident in as a long-term top 6 or top 4 piece, and then who is your under the radar prospect or
Ooh,
kid, I guess, in a way to watch for next season?
that's a great question. I think my vote for a consistent top 6 guy is going to be Dylan Holloway, especially now he's locked in for a 5-year deal, a good team deal. Like you've got him for the beginning of his prime years towards what is still his prime years. And if he can play anything like he's shown, I mean, he's going to be commanding a $10 million contract, when he turns 28 or 29, however old he is when this contract's up. And my under the radar guy, that's a great question. I'm gonna go. They haven't signed him yet, but I am gonna put my hat out there for Jonathan Berggren. Picked up on waivers from the Detroit Red Wings. He
Yep,
came in, played some great hockey, man. Like he showed a lot of skill out there.
he
Get
did.
him signed. Get him signed to a nice little 2-year bridge contract. Get him in that third line wing position where he could show a lot of skill. And I mean, people were complaining so much about the Zach Bolduc trade at the beginning for Logan Mayu, but like really, if this guy can contribute like Bolduc did, where you're flirting with 20 goals a year and 50 points, that's a
Yeah.
steal, man. That's an under
Oh,
the radar guy
easily.
for me.
I mean, especially when on that third line, whenever Berggren was playing with Dvorsky and Neighbours for the
Hmm.
last little bit of the season, I felt like his contributions on that line was doing him very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I could see potentially the Blues going after him and signing him to maybe a short bridge deal of maybe a like 1-2 years to see if his production increases from how it has from last season into these next coming seasons if they decide to sign him, and then work on it from there if they decide to give him more term and more money, and then they can kind of see going from there. But I mean, my picks I was gonna have, I I was gonna pick Dvorsky for my the most confident, but and I could potentially see them putting him into the top 6 role with having him as a second line center, but with still potentially having Suter in the mix, I don't know if they keep him as second line center or if they're going to put Buchnevich in that spot, or if they are going to say, hey, get in the camp. Dvorsky, if you show like what you did in the Olympics, show what you did kind of throughout periodically in the season that you can be that high-end center, then I feel like he can be kind of in that position where he's going to be a good all-around top 6 centerman for the Blues.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I'm cautiously optimistic with him. I thought he had a solid year, but it wasn't as impactful as I was expecting to be. And maybe because we were kind of enjoying Snuggerud and his performance, and Dvorsky just didn't show it as much. He was real apprehensive when it came to offensive things.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking at him. He's got to step up. We need him to be more than, I mean, if he's going to be a third line center, so be it. But that means we have like 2 or 3 third line centers. We don't have a definitive second line center. So,
Right.
I think the ball is in Dvorsky's court to show this team that he can be that guy. But it's right now I feel like it's a big ask for him.
Yeah. And then my under the radar guy, I'm going to kind of go the same route as you. I was originally going to do Mayu, but I feel like he was kind of showing his stuff pretty good towards the end of the season there with being paired with Broberg. So we didn't really see a whole lot from Finley last season. I feel like he could be a kind of an under the radar kid that once he gets into a definitive role, I feel like this upcoming season, depending on who he's going to be paired with, I feel like Finley can actually go somewhere with this team because we got him still for another 2 years.
Yeah. He's a nice surprise, a nice pickup off the waiver wire from Tampa.
Yeah.
And just he had a lot of grit. He had some, there's some hiccups along the way, but I think that's natural when you're thrusted in a position like he was. So I think let's see what he does in a full season with the Blue Note and see how he benefits, because that could be the guy that replaces Oskar Sundqvist as your fourth line center. So that could be a natural thing. Or if the Blues are able to upgrade the second line center, then it could be really between him, Pius Suter, any of them, and see what happens with that. So
yeah.
I definitely I like Finley a lot. He's got a lot of grit to him. So I'm hoping that there's more to that. So
same for me. Kind of getting off of that topic and kind of going what we're going to talk about next with a lot of the big off-season decisions that this team is coming up with going through the start of the off-season, which I'd say the off-season has more or less started for the Blues. And you got the draft coming up in another 3 weeks since it's the 26th of December.
Yep.
You more or less it's a whole month prior to whenever the draft is going to be happening. And you have, at the time, massive 2 months that the Blues are more or less having to try to decide what direction they're wanting to go, if they're going to lay into Pavel Buchnevich, Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, or do you think that there are other ways of making those players pivot and go to other players that of more of a youth movement that we've kind of talked about already a little bit earlier in the show? It's just that with the decision of where they're going to go with this team when I Alexander Steen takes over on July 1st, and how Armstrong is going to kind of set him up prior to then, especially with the draft being right before Steen takes over. I'm really kind of looking to see what direction this team is going to go in.
Right. It's, this is a very monumental point in this franchise's history. Like right here, right now, they've got, 3 first round draft picks. There is a lot of, there's uh, a lot of different pundits out there that are saying they're looking to make a splash. I've heard, I believe it was Darren Drager who recently posted that the Blues are looking to make a statement this off season.
I feel like
And
they should, especially
they
with
need.
where they're going to be at with
Mm-hmm.
the amount of draft picks that they have in the first and second
Right.
round. I feel like
100%.
they should be going out and trying to do anything and everything that they can to make a splash. It's kind of like what Montreal did last season. Me and Aaron kind of talked about it earlier today with what we saw from Montreal and the amount of moves and everything that they did last offseason, and the step from not being in the playoffs last year to making it to the conference final this year in the playoffs. That just shows what a few moves here and there in the offseason could do for your team, especially with how young of a team that Montreal has.
Right. And that's the thing. The Blues have good prospects in place, the 3 draft picks. There are a lot of things they can do. The biggest thing that they have to think about is they do not have to be a competitive team this year because you've got 3 powerhouse teams right in front of you in the Central Division. You have to find a way to break them. The problem is, I don't know if they could do that this coming year. Those teams are still going to be good. I know a lot of people have really hit the Colorado Avalanche hard after they got eliminated and swept by the Knights. Like they're still a really good team, and yeah, I mean, let's face it, their team it rises and sets with Cale Makar. Even though McKinnon is probably their best player, but Makar is their drive. That's their engine.
Oh
And
yeah,
with him
he
being injured,
quarterbacks so much of that offense.
right. And with him being injured, they just weren't able to handle it. So, and now these guys are getting a year older. So, it might be the time where the Blues can make a move to step into that top 3, but it may not be this year. So, any move they make, I think, has to be set up to where it prepares them in 2 years' time, where once these guys are ready to go, look out. Like this Blues team could be the next one in the Central Division. Because, Dallas, and honestly, Dallas to me is on that point of like, I don't know how much better they're going to be. Because now they got to sign Jason Robertson. That is a
Well, even if they
massive.
even do sign him, they could
Right,
just say,
right.
"Hey, we're going to let you go to what is it? Because he's still an RFA, isn't he?
He is an RFA. So if somebody saw, well, I mean, but the problem is
They could go to offer sheet for him. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but you're giving up 4 number 1 draft picks.
Yeah, that would be crazy for a team to do.
And no offense, Robertson is not worth 4 first round draft picks. He's just not.
No, I don't
So,
see it.
like, I think they sign him, but that's going to cost them because then you've got 2 guys in your lineup that's going to make $15 million a piece. So, they're going to lose guys. Bork is one of the RFAs that's probably going to go bye-bye. They may cut Jamie Benn. That might be a guy they cut ties with. That's a possibility. But I mean, he may retire too. So that's another thing to look at. So there's a lot of factors there in the Central Division, but the Blues have to be focused on themselves. They have to decide what's the best path for us. So like you got to ask yourself, like, what they got draft capital. What do you think is going to happen in this situation?
So for me, and I think what the Blues should ultimately do, and I've thought about a lot. I've thought about this a lot, especially with everything coming up for just the Central Division as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you kind of touched on it briefly. You're not knowing how Colorado and Dallas. I mean, the two powerhouses, more or less, in the Central Division right now. You're not sure how their structure is going to look over the next 2 to 3 years. I mean, yeah, you have Robertson coming up as an RFA. You
Mm-hmm.
have Sagan, who's going to be out after this year, I think after next season.
Right.
Blackwell for the same. And I mean, you got a number of guys on that team that are going to be coming up in the next year or so, and you potentially may have to sign Robertson. You're going to have to weigh the options on that. And then you have Colorado. I mean, those guys are contracted up for, I think, the next 2 seasons as well. So, I mean, they're going to be good going into next year and the year after that. And then you have Minnesota, who they've been struggling as of late. You can see that the chips are kind of starting to kind of get into that spot. I feel like if the Blues are able to get in the right area that they're wanting to be in, they could potentially be right there with Minnesota being taken
Mm-hmm.
over that spot with or for Colorado and Dallas over the next 3-ish years.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
with that, I feel like these guys have to get rid of some nagging contracts on this team. And one of them in particular is the Pavel Buchnevich contract. I mean,
Yeah.
you're looking at 5 more years of Pavel Buchnevich and taking up $8 million of salary cap
Right.
availability. And he didn't really have the greatest of year this year. He was a little, you could kind of see the wheels kind of falling off a little bit last season, but this year was the big season that was like, what's going on? I feel like you obviously have to get rid of Buchnevich. Kyrou is one of those guys on this team right now that he's done it year in and year out to where he's gotten 20 to 30 plus goals or points. And he's done decent in times, and then he's fallen off in times. And the guys on the Last Minute Blues podcast, and even Jeremy Rutherford has said it in posts on Twitter, that the relationship between Kyrou and St. Louis has gotten kind of to a point now to where, yeah, he might still be playing good for this team, and he may want to still stay here, but it might almost be a point where you might want to say, hey, it's time for different scenery, just because of
Mm-hmm.
it, the mental anguish that it'd probably take on the dude with everything that's been said about him and everything that kind of goes with being here and dealing with all of that could take a toll on him and start gradually decreasing, or the production level that he has might start lowering. So
Right.
I could see them trying to do something with either the Buchnevich contract, the Kyrou contract, and I don't know how you would feel about this, but I've been hearing a lot of rumors with Parayko and having talks with Anaheim,
Yeah.
and I could potentially see that happening. I think it would be good, especially with how well you saw Broberg and Mayu take over the top line, like the last third of the season, this past season. Now, with guys like Drouin and Sundqvist, who are kind of coming to their term with the Blues, I almost feel like you are almost be at the point of letting those guys go, especially with having 3 first-round draft picks in this
Mm-hmm.
upcoming season. I feel like if the Blues are want to stay relevant, I feel like at least 2 or 3 of the contracts that I mentioned earlier between Buchnevich, Kyrou, Parayko, I feel like at least one of those has to go and get a little bit higher in the draft and get a pertinent piece of a prospect that could be relevant for this team over the next couple of years.
It's a great point, Brandon. It's the challenge that lies here is one, who do you move them to? And two, do they want to move?
Right, because
Obviously,
most of them have
they
the
all have,
the,
yeah,
the
they all have no trade clauses. Like all three of all Pareko, I mean, honestly, Thomas Pareko, Kyrou, Buchnevich all have no trade clauses.
mhm.
So the question lies like, are you able to move a person like Pareko? I know that some people have said like Pareko might be good to move somewhere in the Western Conference. Like you said, you mentioned Anaheim. Uh,
Because I thought
or
somewhere along the line he said that he would be cool with going to somewhere along the West Coast, like a L.A. or an Anaheim or something like that.
right, or hey, San Jose needs a defenseman. They have a draft pick that they have a spot in the draft that you know the Blues would really like to have. So I'm not saying it's going to be a Pareko for the number two, but it could be the Pareko, the 11, the 15, in some iteration like that for the number two draft pick. If that's
Mhm.
the way the Blues want to go, then if that's able to make that happen, then make it happen. Make a splash. You've got, a few years back, they had, not even a few years back, but they had multiple draft picks, first round draft picks. They traded for Braden Shen
Yep,
at the draft.
I
And that was a
remember.
monumental trade for the Blues. They
Wasn't that
fleeced
back
Philly.
in 16
Yeah,
or
I think
17?
so. Something like, yeah,
Because I thought it
six.
was like a year or
No,
two before they made the run for the Stanley Cup in the 19 in
I think
19.
it was, you know what? It was 17. That's when it was because it was the year before they won the cup. It was the season before the cup. So again, that's a move that if that's there, whatever that may be, like that might be worthwhile. Is there another Braden Shen out there that they can make a trade for? Do they try to put all their chips in and go after number two pick? It's going to be high. Or do they just move in the top 10 and they take their chances? If they want Ivar Stenberg, he's a great pickup. But another guy that we could look at too, is say if they move into the sixth or seventh spot and they pick up a guy who I want to see them make a move for if they could do it, if they could draft Vigo Bjork, who's a
I,
center, and this kid's got a lot of talent. And I think about him, I think of Logan Stankoven. Logan Stankoven is a 5'9" center, and he is a badass for the Carolina Hurricanes. Trade, he's been one of the top. He's been one of the most productive centers for not only Carolina, but he was productive with Dallas when he was with when he was with the Stars. And Vigo falls in that same category of the only reason why he's being portrayed as a lower top 10 pick is because his height. That's it. He's just as productive as Stenberg and McKenna, but he's also a center. So do the Blues make a move like that? It seems more feasible to make a trade to get in that, 5, 6, 7, area in the draft, and they can make that move if that's what they want. Again,
right.
we don't know what the high priority is or what they're going to take to do it, but like you said, one of those contracts ideally would need to be moved. If I had to guess, I'd probably have to say Pareko might be the one that they can make move the easiest because maybe Pareko's ready to move on, but
Hmm.
I just don't think I don't see anyone wanting to take that Pavel Buchnevich contract. I mean, and I've also heard Kyrou is possibly for a lot of teams that need a scoring winger. Like I know the Islanders are one, the Rangers, the Edmonton Oilers really need a goal scorer. So there's a lot of possibilities, but it's a matter of are they willing to waive their no trade clauses for that opportunity? And that I just don't know.
Yeah. What the one question I wanted to ask? We kind of already touched on it. Was the one question I wanted to touch on, but we already kind of recorded more or less a lot on it. Was if you had to move one of Buchnevich, Thomas, Kyrou, who and why, and what would you need coming back for that either
Okay.
position, age, or timeline? We've already kind of touched on it a little
I
bit.
Yeah, I mean, if I had a choice, the contract I would want to move first and foremost would be Pavel Buchnevich. Like we said, I like the guy. He is a good worker, but from a statistic point wise, if you're not going to be able to pick up a center that's going to complement him, then you need to find someone who will take him. It's a tough ask. It's a lot
Yeah.
to say. I mean, honestly, that'd be a guy that if the blue, as much as I'm not a fan of it, if they want to buy out his contract, buy it out. Let him try and sign with somebody else
Because
so
I'm
that
sure
they.
somebody would pick him up in waivers if
I'm
it
think I'm sure
ultimately
they
had
would.
to go that route.
I'm sure they would. It would be a smart move, and with the cap going up, if you know, there's probably a competitive team out there that could use him and utilize him the right way.
Yeah.
It's just the blue, and the other thing is they keep switching him from center to wing. He's a wing. He's a
Oh, for
really
sure. He's
smart.
always been a wing. It's just
Yeah,
that the
he's
last
I
couple of
mean,
years with him having being center, they didn't really work out all
right.
that great whenever they had the coach before Monty that was here. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But it didn't really work for them whenever they had him there. But this season, it felt like it worked a little bit better for him. But still, I would say that he's still remotely just a winger and not a centerman.
Right. Then they only use that. They only use that for him because they needed center help, and they know he's a very intelligent player, and he could fake it till he makes it. But if you want to be competitive, if you want to be better than that, he's not a center. Don't put him in that center position. Put him on a wing or find someone that'll take him.
Yeah, I would agree. Before we move on to draft capital and the trade up talk that we already have kind of touched on, what is something, because we've always seen it in years that we kind of like this year with the level of picks and everything that Armstrong kind of has in his back pocket. What is something of like a Armstrong blueprint move that you could see them ultimately doing either before the deadline or before the draft or at the draft whenever before Steen takes over?
I could definitely see Armstrong trade one or two of those first round picks to honestly to pick up a Braden Shen like player.
Mhm.
Another like probably make a move for a second line center that will, slot right in and be a contributor. Someone of, in that 26, 27 year range, they can make that happen. It's just a
Yeah,
matter of where, who they trade with and who's willing to, who wants to give that up. Does Doug have one more fleece trade in his back pocket to where people are like, oh, he did it again. I can't believe this guy.
yeah. One of the
Because I mean,
ones. Go ahead.
what?
Sorry,
No, because I
because
mean
there was
that's
a kind of a move that I was hearing a lot of, but I'll let you finish and then I'll say what the move was that I was hearing a lot of.
okay. No, really, like what y- you know, that's the thing. Like Doug is that master when it comes to trade making that trade. That trade, you go, oh man, I can't believe he just did that. And what seems like a little win for the other team turns out to be not so good. Like he's done it. He did it with Braden Shen. He did it with the Ryan O'Reilly trade. Of course, now when you look back, both teams have won that because Tage Thompson is an absolute beast of a
It's like a
player.
stud now.
Hey, he's amazing. But, again, that was the risk you take when you make that trade. But we won the cup by making that trade. So I don't think there's a cup winning trade right this year, but I could easily see Army, lump a player with one or two of those first round picks and put a guy in that can give us that that center help.
For sure. And so this was a move that I had heard earlier, like towards the end of the season, right at the start towards the off season. And you might have heard it too, but I was hearing talks about New Jersey, and you probably have an idea of where this is going now.
Yep,
But
I'm getting it.
I heard somewhere along the wire that they're maybe looking to try to move Nico Heischer.
Yeah.
And whenever that kind of clicked in, I was like, ooh. And I know he said that he was wanting to go somewhere in the West, but if you look at their defense and how it's structured right now, Dougie Hamilton's getting a little bit on the older side. And
Mm-hmm.
aside from him, you haven't really had much of a defensive core or but veteran presence besides Dougie Hamilton. What if
Right.
you move one of the draft picks that you have, and it may be a prospect, depending on which one it is, and then also tie in Colton Parayko for a guy like Nico Hischier that could easily be either a number 1 or number 2 center for the St. Louis Blues. And then you could, if you do move on from Colton Parayko, that could easily line up a spot for either Theo Lindstein or Adam Jirasek to be able to have them fly right into that second line pairing on the defense.
It may, if that trade is available, I say go for that trade, because I don't think that log jams anyone. Because the biggest thing that a lot of people said that, that are for the Blues is, hey, what if they make this trade for, X winger, then it's gonna log jam this guy, or they're really worried about this log jam of spots that guys can't develop. But Nico Hischier, see, a lot of things that people have to realize is, although Thomas is a great center, he is not an elite number 1 center. He is a solid, good centerman, but he's not a true number 1.
Yeah.
And Nico Hischier technically isn't a true number 1 either, but I would rather have 2 guys of similar styles be that 1 and 2C spot that helps out, your Jordan Kyrou and your Pavel Buchnevich, and let Dalibor Dvorsky stay at the 3C. Let him develop. Don't, because obviously he didn't, they put him to the test. He did okay. He did admirable, but he didn't rise up to be the 2C that everyone thinks he can be. Why not get a guy in there that is 27, 28, like Nico Hischier is? He signs a 5-6 year contract here. It may have to be more money than what Thomas and them make annually, but go for it. If that can happen, go for it.
And I feel like he would fit in perfectly with how Monty plays his
100%.
level of game.
And he was the captain of the Devils. So you're getting a guy with leadership quality.
Yeah.
A lot of, he's a good playmaking center. He'd bolster this team a lot. So yeah, I say if that move is available, make the move. Let's go.
For sure. With that, kind of moving into our last topic that we are going to kind of go over today was our draft capital, and if the Blues were going to take that draft capital and try to any kind of trade up talks. Obviously, as of right now, at the deadline with the moves for Shen, Falk, etc., the Blues now own 3 picks in the first round, which is 11, 15, and with the Colorado Avalanche going out in the conference final, we would have the 30th pick, if I'm not mistaken.
29th.
So is it the 29th or 30th? I can't remember which one it was.
It is the 29th. They got the 29th pick.
Okay. So with that, you got some coverage is already talking about the weaponizing of their 2026 first round capital, suggesting that they could either load up on those 3 prospects or package picks to climb up the board. They're projecting the pick around 11th and 15 range to be at least 2 of those first, creating natural speculation around trading up in a true top tier draft. Now, we've heard that obviously they're talking about with San Jose. I've heard talks with Winnipeg, and I think even Seattle, and somewhere within the top 10. And one of the ones that I was actually kind of getting a little bit of traction to was Winnipeg, because for one, they want to stay in kind of that window that they're in, and in order for them to kind of get there, they would need some sort of high quality player. And with that, I felt like either having Buchnevich, Kyrou, Thomas, one of those level of players you could easily throw in for that. I think it's like their 7th or 8th in the draft order. And if you're looking for a centerman, and kind of like the guy that you were talking about earlier, you could also look at a guy like Tynan Lawrence, who has played for Boston University. He's done very well for himself, especially since he's tied to be 7th ranked in the draft. That's a center too that you could potentially go for, or Caleb Malhotra.
Right. All of them are very good choices, and even like Bleacher Nation has Tylen Lawrence as the number 10 going
Mm-hmm.
to Nashville Predators. So he's within reach to make that move if they want to go that route, because he's a really solid, like you said, solid player, good size, 6 foot, 185.
Yeah.
Um, he seems like that's going to be a good deal. And he was more highly touted earlier in the year, and I think just some of his performance was a little lacking,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't kill him too much. And who's the other center you said? Oh,
Caleb
you said Caleb.
Malhotra.
Yeah, that's right. Now he's been slotted at number 3
Mm-hmm.
and by the Vancouver Canucks, which that's a good move for them. And it's again, this is a hard. This draft is really good in the top 6, questionable from 6 to 10,
Yeah.
and then it drops off after that. So there's, I think there's a path the Blues can do to get in the top 10, and it's a matter of who's the guy they really want. Like if you say that Ivar Stenberg is their number 1 choice, that's the guy they really want. It's going to take a king's ransom to get him,
Oh,
because that means they got to move within. They got to move in the top 3. Because at the very least, Stenberg goes number 4 to the Blackhawks. Disgusting,
yeah,
but
because
that's
they've been highly
yeah,
talking about it. If he makes it
right,
that high, they were
right,
going to take him.
yeah, and honestly, San Jose needs defense. So if they're probably gonna draft a defenseman number 2. Like that's a very strong possibility. They
And I
don't
was thinking
need,
either like Chase Reed or Carson Carls,
yeah,
somewhere along those lines.
yeah. My money's on Chase Reed more. Just it's not about, I'm not gonna be like, oh man, that was a bad choice. They should have went with Carl. I just, I think either or is a good move for them, and that's what they need to bolster their team.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're in that surprise. They made that surprise move this year. Their ascension is pretty big, and I know they're not going to want to make some blockbuster move to move in the playoffs, because that's
Yeah.
all they're going to do is get in the playoffs with this move. This isn't like Minnesota trading for Quinn Hughes kind of thing,
No.
where that was something they needed to do. So I think it's going to take a lot to get that number 2 spot, but I think when you have teams like, you know, case in point, you got Florida, you got Winnipeg, teams that maybe don't want to draft that high, but will. But if you're going to give them like a player that's on your roster and a decent prospect to move up, and one of your first round draft picks to move up, I think that's a good move. I think they should do that. I think that's a way to make an impact on this team, to bolster your team, not this year, but in 2 years. Because if you pick, say, like you said, Lawrence, Bjork, you've got 2 or 3 good centers in that 10, in that top 10, that if you made that move, you know, you're going to be one heck of a competitive team in 2 years.
I would
And
agree.
and honestly, that's where the Blues stand right now. They're 2 years away from being truly competitive,
Yeah.
just because of, we've already talked about how deep the Central is right now. Like it's one of the toughest divisions in the NHL right now, because you've got 3, 4 teams that are ultra competitive and should be in the playoffs year in, year out.
Yeah. Easily. And to kind of tie up that note, I mean, especially with the pipeline that the Blues already have, with you seeing Dvorsky, Snuggerud,
Hmm.
Lindstein, Carbonneau, Jurasek, you 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 already know that some of these guys, and I've heard talks about this everywhere. You're not going to be able to have positions for all of these guys,
Hmm.
and
Right.
so if especially with guys that are currently already on the roster, you're not going to have room for all of these guys. You know the few that you're like absolutely like yes, we are keeping these few prospects, these few
Yeah.
current roster players. Why not package a few of them? Either go to uh, San Jose, like you said, Florida, Winnipeg, any one of those teams within that top 10, and say, hey, we're willing to make moves. Obviously, we have 3 high end draft picks, several prospects that we have seen that are doing very well within the AHL and the NHL level, and then we have a handful of veteran guys on our roster that are, if you are looking to make a run within however long a time frame, you have a guy that is full proven, ready to go with whichever you decide to go with, either Jordan Kyrou, Pavel Buchnevich, Robert Thomas, Colton Parayko, depending on if they're willing to make those moves at the
Hmm.
or at the draft day, then you could easily, I feel like, get into a slot to where you can easily set set your future up for success.
Right. And that's the best way to do it. I think I really think history will tell us what this draft meant to the Blues in more ways than one.
Yeah.
I think this is Army's swan song with this draft, and it's Steen ascending into the GM role come July 1st, like officially becomes that. So I think here and now is when the Blues have to say, this is our path and this is where they take it. This is the moment that they have to take it
So
and not screw this up.
one thing that I did want to kind of touch on, because I was just looking at the kind of some of the international skaters on this list for the upcoming draft.
Hmm.
And I know we've been talking about trying to get into one of those higher, like top 5 picks. If they opt to not go for Ivor Stenberg, and how they went for that trade that involved Colton Parayko, and they had the chance to get that pretty big, bulky defenseman prospect. What if they go somewhere along the same lines and they draft to get into a higher draft pick, and they go for a defenseman in that Keaton Verhoef, because
Okay.
he's a big kid. He's 6'4", he's 212 pounds, and he's, I mean, in the middle of the season, they were ranking him to be second overall. He's obviously fallen back a little bit since then, and he's ranked to be like 4th or 5th now.
Hmm.
And if you can get somewhere into that middle ground of like, hey, we're cool with where our offense is kind of building up to, but we want more defensive depth, why not go after the kid that's built kind of like what we've seen from the prospect that we were trying to trade for Colton Parayko, and what we've seen already in Colton Parayko with him being a bigger defenseman. But these are kids that could almost want to be wanting to use their size, use their speed, and
Hmm.
be physical as much as what Keaton Verhoef has been, what I've seen in some of the tape and everything, and just from the scouting reports that I've seen.
Honestly, I really like that move. If they can get in that top five, and if that's what they get, and again, a lot of a lot of former GMs have said time and time again, you never draft a need, you draft the best player available. You know, and that's one of the important things that you could do. So if moving up gets your addresses other things, not necessarily needs, but someone to go, hey, this fits us right here, right now, is we're going to move up and we're going to pick, like you said, Keith Verhoef, or is it going to be, Albert Smiths? I don't know, but
Yeah.
those are the moves that are smart. If, yeah, if if you move up for that defenseman, get that right-handed shot. That's what they need in this
Yeah.
that's what they need in the minors. That's what they need in, you know, on their NHL team now. So that's
Yeah.
a good move for me. I would never bat an eye to that move. If they can't, honestly, for me, for the Blues, if they can't get a center, get a defenseman. They
Yeah.
don't need wings. They're loaded with wings. They got plenty of wings. They need centers and they need defensemen. Then you need a bat. So
And
yeah,
that's one thing that was kind of whenever I was looking at everything and like having the kind of the center depth that what we have, seeing the wing depth that we have, and yeah, I get it if like we're able to trade up to like that 2-3, that 2 to 5 position somewhere in there. Everybody's like, oh, go for Ivar Stenberg and everything. Yes, that would be really cool to have the brothers reunited in St. Louis to play with each other. Ultimately, I mean, you're going to have to make some moves in order to make that even remotely work.
right.
And seeing where everything is at with this defense, I mean, yeah, you just locked up Broberg for 6 years. You have Parayko for 4 left, Fowler another 3, but you're looking at you got to re-sign Mayu in another year, Tucker in another year, and you got Kessel, who more than likely you're going to move on from because you have both Lindstein and Jirasek moving up at
Hmm.
the prospects from the AHL at some point or another. And aside from that, you have who else do you have? Kind of in the midst of things, you got Gaudette, you got Rosen, but I mean, a lot of those guys. Oh, you have Fisher too. I almost forgot about Fisher, but I mean, you have those guys that you haven't really heard much from, aside from maybe Fisher. And if you're able to trade up, get a guy like Keaton Verhoef or uh, who's the other one that I really like that I saw? Daxon Rudolph, but I feel like he's going to be a little bit higher up and maybe go a little bit sooner than what you could probably get because
Yeah.
those both those guys are bigger in the sense of like they're 6'2", 6'4" defensemen, over 200 pounds is which something that you don't really have aside from Colton Parayko.
Right. Like it's, the Blues made really a few years ago, they made a grievous error by not staying with big mobile defensemen. They went smaller. They went with faster defensemen, which they thought that was the route that the NHL was going, thanks to Cale Makar. It didn't happen. And now they're trying to bolster that back up, getting, Logan Mailloux and, Phil Broberg, guys that are over 6 foot. And, they're in that 185, 190, you know, weight area and they're mobile. So they're redoing that. So heck, stock that cupboard. Get those draft another big defenseman. So that way, okay, you either have him in the minors or you have a great trade chip to bolster you know, your NHL team. I think it's good either way. I think it's a win-win no matter what. And if that's where it falls, draft that best guy right there. Go for it.
Of course, I 100% agree. Was there any other things that you wanted to cover tonight before we get going?
No, no, I think I am good. I think we hit a lot of stuff. I'm looking forward to whatever's going to happen this draft. It's this is a this is a draft that has no guarantees in my opinion. None.
Yeah,
Like not even, every other than probably the number one pick, every every piece of this draft is up for is on the board, I think. And
yeah,
it's just a matter of who's going to sacrifice to move into those spots, if at
yeah,
all.
yeah. Because this is one of the first years that I really felt like that a lot of the top 10, they're not really solidified, or like they're not really there. Some of them are question marks if they're going to keep the spots or if they're going to trade them away. There's other
Yeah.
years in the past I felt like once the draft lottery has been in, like they're more or less have been like, yep, we're keeping these spots and we know what people that we're gonna be drafting. These mock drafts that I've seen this year have been all over the place.
Yeah.
Aside from maybe the top 2 or 3,
Yeah.
other than that, everybody else has been all over the board from how they've been ranking themselves. So
Right.
I
It's
it's going to
everywhere.
be a big question mark, I think, once it comes to draft day.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's a lot of teams that are looking at this draft and like, and I think a lot of these fringe top 10 teams are going to say, is it worth us to move up? Like, is a guy there that we think, if we could get him, that's what we should make that we should move the pieces we need to get that spot? Or is it just saying, let's just stay put? Again, I think the Blues have a great opportunity here, you know, and it like I said, it's gonna change the face of this team over the next 5 years, guaranteed. Whatever they do here will be a sign in 5 years now where they go, "Yep, that was a good move," or "God, we were a moron. Why do we do that?"
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, the moves that we definitely make this offseason and in the draft, I feel like could have a big shaping point of how this team is going to be looking over the next 3 to 5 years. Easily.
Right.
So, if you guys have stuck around to this point, thank you so much for tuning in and watching this episode of the Blues Note Show, brought to you by St. Louis Sports. Please like, comment, subscribe. If you like what you've kind of seen from our shows, we'd love to hear your thoughts of like what all we could talk about for different topics. Who do you guys think will be the Blues' first, I guess, drafts in the first round, if they're going to keep those draft picks or they're going to trade them off? Please put them down in the comments for us to kind of talk about in later shows. And also hit that like and subscribe button so that way you will hear or be notified whenever we do have shows coming up in the future. But until next time, guys, thank you for tuning in for this episode, and we will see you guys in the next one. Peace.